Hey, and welcome to the channel. This video is an almost complete maintenance for a Honda Rubicon 520 IRS foot shift 2020 model. A lot of the information and procedures will apply to different model ATVs and years like Ranchers or even Pioneer 500 or 520s in some aspects. Of course, always check specs for the specific model when in doubt. I'll show the service manual procedures and how I might do things slightly different, like not having a specialty tool. Again, use your discretion, and if you're unsure, get help. But this is how I've got many miles out of my Rubicons and helped many friends do the same. As maintenance is the key to longevity, a good cleaning is a good start so you don't have dirt in your engine while you're trying to check valve clearance, for instance. Everything will be tabbed in the timeline and description, whether you're trying to figure out how to pull the plastics to adjusting valves. Enjoy. And before I get started, I always go ahead and just pop my plastics. That way I can get to everything, clean everything nice and easy. And there's a little handle right here. You just pull up, it's gonna pop your seat off. The back section, pull that little rubber down, then pop the front up right here, and then that's gonna slide out. Give you access there. And then this cover can be a little tricky, but there's gonna be pin, if you can see it back in here. There's another one back over in here, and then a lot of times I end up breaking these even though I'm familiar with where they are, which there's no little pull tab right here. Then kind of the same thing on the other side, pull tab. And then this, if you can't tell, I'm kind of working my hands up here. And the more you do that, you'll get a feel for it, but it's easy enough to miss a tab. But again, 1, 2, 3, 2 up top here and here, and then same thing on the other side, 1, 2, 3, and then there's a little plastic piece here and here. And if you notice right here, and then on the other side, that is going to be your little grooves that sit in there, and you need to have all you kind of work at it as a whole unit. But now that's where I can get to everything, get everything good and cleaned up before starting to do the maintenance on this. And then the radiator is simple enough. You just pop that, you can get your radiator cap. As the ATV is running, the little service interval will come up, and it'll either have a 1 or a 2, and I'll show you in the manual what that indicates as far as helping keep regulated on your services there. Now, as you're cycling through, there's going to be 2 ways you can hit the next service. It's going to either be hours or miles, and you have to be stopped. They won't let you get to this menu as you're moving, so it'll count down to 0, and then if you keep going past, and that's why I did 1 extra mile, it's a -1 mile. And the hours will do the same thing if you go past hours. Now, hour wise, I still had 14 hours, but I've hit the mile, so it's time for the next maintenance. And as you're driving around, that little service indicator will stay up regardless as to what you are here, but when you're stopped, you can check to see how many miles you got coming up for your next maintenance. I always like to check that if I'm doing a trip or something coming up. I'll preemptively do my maintenance. If I got a big trip coming up, I don't want to overrun my miles a long period. A mile or 2 won't hurt nothing. And to reset the maintenance indicator is fairly simple. You're going to press and hold the mode button with the switch off, and then turn the switch on. You're going to wait for so many seconds. It's going to flash twice at you, and once you've done that, you've successfully reset the maintenance indicator. Alright, so the little wrench indicator is letting you know kind of what interval you're on if you keep up with your maintenance correctly. If you get the little wrench by itself, if you just got the machine, that's going to be your first service interval. And then from there, it's going to rotate service interval with the 1 or service interval with the 2. And that's going to be, again, 600 miles and then another 600 miles. So initial service, 600 miles, 1,200 miles, and then you're going to keep going. Now, the one that always seems to kind of create an argument, and I can show you why, is your valve clearance. It's got an inspection for your initial, and then every so many miles. Now, service 1 notes is service more frequently when riding in dusty conditions. Service 2 notes, service more frequently when riding in muddy, very wet or muddy condition. Service note 3, replace every 2 years, kind of like a regardless. And then 4 is for if you have California emissions. And then you have two asterisks here, and that's where the valve clearance has the asterisk. But if you see the notes on here, and I'll slow down and go through here in just a second, should be serviced by a dealer unless owner has proper tools, service data isn't mechanically qualified. Well, we're going to try that today. Not that I've done this a few times. In the interest of safety, we recommend these items only be serviced by Honda. So that's just their notes when you see whether it's the asterisk here or going through here and you see a note. That's what they're pertaining to. And I'm going to do a slow guide through. Now the valve clearance, that's one that creates a lot of arguments on Facebook, and I have my own opinion on it, or feel like I have the correct data on that. Now these are all Honda service manuals. The only one I have that has this note, though I have seen it in other ones, this is my Honda Pioneer service manual. And if you go to inspect valve clearance, this is the only manual out of 4 that I currently have that has a note 1, and I've seen it in other Honda manuals or working on other Hondas. It says inspect valve clearance as needed if engine is noisy. Now I've done a lot of valve clearance inspections. Rarely does the first one ever need to be done. I've never personally ran across one. Now I have inspected Hondas before that are not making any noise, but the clearance are getting tighter and I have to adjust the valve clearance, but it wasn't making any extra noise. Now the way I always view this one, and again, Hondas do seem really good on keeping valve clearance, but if you're riding along and all of a sudden you start hearing it, that's a sign that the clearance is getting out of spec. You need to go ahead and check it and adjust it before it becomes a bigger issue. It is a good idea to check valve clearance occasionally. Do I do it every single time? No, but have I done it before and it not be noisy and it needs an adjustment? Yes, I have occasionally run across that. So it's a good thing to check occasionally. Mine hasn't needed it so far. We're at 2,500 miles. See if it needs it today. But that's the first one we're gonna do is check the valve clearance. I've already cleaned the ATV. Now for your valve clearance, it's gonna be right here and here. And now another argument people will say is, oh, if you take it to the dealer, they don't ever check it. You know, so I've had this one previously at the dealer with a maintenance plan, and if you can see right up in there, and I'll try to get a light on it here in a second. So with the light on, if you can see up in there, the spot I'm trying to show specifically, you can see that little nick right here. Somebody has had a wrench on it. So again, that's a little telltale. If your dealer is charging you a crazy amount for your first services or whatever, you can look for telltales, and this is where you're going to look. So if you come in after getting your bike service and they haven't nicked, or you can't tell that this has ever been removed or cleaned up, it's like, hey, some dealers might charge you for a full service and not ever actually bother to check the valves. Mine, I can tell you by looking at it before and after. Mine has checked the valves, so I do have a good dealer locally. I'm gonna be doing it myself today. I'm out of my service plan. So, and it is kind of a little bit of a pain to get back in there to check all that. So that's what we're gonna do, is break all that down. So if you're debating doing this yourself, along with other maintenance, that's the video. All right, we're gonna go through this together, but if you're read the manual and do something, get that slowly. Basically, we're going to have to get the stuff out of the ECM and pop the fuel tank up if it's like my last Rubicon, which I think it's going to be similar there. Yep, and there goes. And in the picture, it even looks like they did a socket, just kind of how same way I would do it. It's nice that they just show a socket, not some specialty tool just to prop the gas tank up. I feel like sometimes they get a little crazy with specialty tools. Toque Specs. Here's the cap. I do buy new O-rings when I do it. I have those here, and I'll show the part numbers for those. Yeah. Alright, let's get to it. Alright, first one we're going to disconnect. It's going to be that little fuel pump plug. There's a little plug right there. Kick that off to the side. Alright, and they're saying to pop this out of the way. We'll release the breather. I was able to do that by hand, but it might be one of those you might want a pair of pliers or something, depending on how tight it is here. So I'm trying to get to where you can actually see what I'm doing here, but you can see that pretty good. I'm taking a little pair of pliers. Pinched in and pulled that out. I'm going to try to show as best I can, but I'm going to kind of prop this up, and you're going to push in right there, and that tab, you can see down in there, pulling down releases it from here, and the reverse is just going to be pushed in there, and that kind of, I'm trying to do this with the GoPro, but same thing, there's a little tab right there. You pull down, that releases it. That's the two easiest ways to get those two. I'm trying to use a GoPro mount and kind of show you hands-on versus just explaining. Alright, now with that, we have ECM up out of the way. That can pop out right there. Now that's completely out of the way what we need. And then we're going to do this one bolt right here. Pop this hose, and then also this hose over here. There should be a couple grommets and plastic, so that's that right there. It should be, it's over here, there's going to be a little hose too. Pop that to the side. And then there's going to be a grommet here, and then on the other side. Trying to angle it up so hopefully you can see this pretty good. Spark plug's going to be the next thing we have to disconnect, which we are doing spark plugs too. So nice if you can do all your maintenance and kind of knock them out. We'll fish that. Now with the spark plug disconnected, that whole assembly is now off to the side and out of the way. The next one's going to be tank, and this is right here. It's going to be a little push pin. We'll get a tool for that. Alright, the other one releases this little EC connector. Just pop out right there. Alright, next thing I'm going to remove is going to be this little tab right here. Now, if you do enough push pins, I do recommend that little tool right there. It's from Harbor Freight, fairly cheap, but it grabs it and pulls it out there. Not necessary, you can do it with needle nose or pair of pliers, black blade screwdriver, something like that. Now, the next one's going to be that little one right there. I think it's going to be hard to show, but it's going to be the hose clamp that goes down into the assembly over there. We got to get out. I think it can pick up too great, but got a really long screwdriver which actually just works perfect for getting to that angle. And I'll probably rotate that clamp where it's a little bit easier to get to for next time. I think that should be enough. It's just going to be kind of a rotate back and forth until it finally comes. Voila. I always just stick the push pin back so I can know where it's at when I go to reassemble everything. Now, this is tin for the fuel tank. And it would have probably been smart for me not to fill this thing up when it was getting close to the end of the miles, but it is what it is. Once you do that, that'll lift up, and that's where we're going to go find a socket to throw in between there. So when I ran my wires here, if you've seen it earlier, it was like that. I keep enough slack, and this is for my my winch, light bar, stuff like that, to where I can still get this cable propped up here. It's just going to be one of those. You're going to have to work it a little bit. There's some plastic releases, and it don't have to be completely out of the way. You just have to get it up out of the way enough here. So you move it some, and you quite can't get to what you need to. Work with it some more, but don't have to go crazy. You just have to be able to get back in there. That nut to be able to check it. Alright, so if you're looking at the right hand side of the bike, ATV, next one we're going to get at this little plug right here. Make sure you can see it. So that's going to be plug, and that is a 6mm. Best thing to tell. It was a little dirty in there, but should be telling you right, 6mm for that one. The next one, this is kind of a fun one to get to and show. This here. It's going to be that right there on the back side. That nut that you see when we pulled that cover, that's what we're going to turn the crankshaft with. That's going to be, I like keeping everything organized and together. Little Ziploc bags can save a lot of headache in the long run. So next we're going to get these covers popped off. We got, yep. This is a 24, a 15/16. Also seemed like it would fit it. And this is going to be the one that you're going to be able to see everything easier as far as checking. And there goes our valves there. And we'll do new O-rings there. At least with mine, it takes that initial bump. It takes a little bit of effort to get it to break loose, but from there, pretty easy. Alright, there's that second cap. Same thing. Alright, let's get this motor turned over. Again, just to reference, we're going to need to get that T mark lined up. So we're going to rotate that crank around, and it says, if the T mark is passed when trying to align it with the index mark, continue to rotate the crankshaft clockwise to align. Do not rotate the crankshaft counterclockwise. This is to prevent the one-way decompression system from functioning, which would cause an incorrect valve clearance adjustment. Rotate the crankshaft using the recoil starter. Now that is nice when you have a recoil starter, but we don't in this case. And make sure the piston is top dead center on the compression stroke. The piston, this position can be attained by confirming that there is slack in both rockers. If there is no slack, rotate the crankshaft clockwise one full turn to match the T mark up again. So you can be 180 out where you need to be, checking for that clearance there. This one I probably won't actually be able to show the lettering, but I'm going to show you kind of like what I do and a little trick here. Now this is like for firearms, if you're inspecting bores, I think they call it a bore light or something like that. But in this case, it's kind of perfect to get some light in there. And when you're at the right angle, you can actually see the L and the N. I'm trying to get this on camera. It's going to be about impossible, but the idea here is, you know, I can get about one click, and I can rotate that over by hand. I'm rotating until that T aligns on the mark there. That's a 17 millimeter. And just kind of a little note, you do have to move the O-ring. I don't know if it's very visible on camera, but if you notice, like right in there, that's the little mark that you're lining up that T for. So if the O-ring's in there, you can't see that mark. And 17, just gonna be easily rotating and watching closely. Now here I'm glancing and looking through that hole, and I'm waiting for that T to line up on the notch just like it was in the manual. It's easy to pass, and again, if you do pass the T, you're just going to keep rotating it right. Don't back up, you're going to mess up your reading. So I got it at the T, but kind of like what they were talking about, it can be 180 degrees off, and that's what I'm here. So if I grab either one of those rockers, I don't have slack in either of them, so I got to keep that rotation so that T comes back around again. Now, same thing, clockwise rotation here, back around to that T. Now, if you happen to miss the T this time, you're going to miss it purposefully again because the next 180 you already know is off. This will show up maybe if I put it upside down here. That's just going to be one of those that, and it's an N before the T, so you can kind of see that little hash mark, but that's the T in there, and it's lined up. That's when they mean a little slack, they ain't talking about a whole lot, but yeah, you can barely make it audible. But I actually have I can grab both of them, and I have just a little bit of slack there. I can move my hand. When it was 180 off, I couldn't do that at all. So that's what they're talking about, just a touch of slack on both sides, T marks lined up. You're now in a correct position to check your valve clearance. So a couple notes here. When checking the clearance, slide the feeler gauge from the center towards the outside, and the intake and exhaust valve are going to have two different clearances there. They can be within the same range, but so we're going to get some feeler gauges. And the manual doesn't state, but if anybody's kind of curious which one is which, you got your intake right here, that's going in, so that's going to be your intake valve. And then if you notice, you got your exhaust coming out on this side, so this is going to be your exhaust valve. If there's any confusion, I mean, this is one of those, they feel like if you're doing this, you should know that enough, but it's not really specified in the manual, but that's what the two are there. And since the intake's going to be the easiest to video, I'm going to show that, but the procedure is going to be kind of the same. I typically go, now in this case it's going down to 0.02 millimeters. Now my thinnest feeler gauge, it's that thin, 0.04 millimeters. So by the fact that I can move it by hand, I feel like I should have this, but I start on the low end of the spectrum and then I go up, filling each gauge up. Now if I go past that 0.15, that means I have too much play and I'm gonna have to do an adjustment. Same thing I'm gonna do with the exhaust. I'm gonna start low, keep jumping step size up, and if I go past that 0.23, it's gonna be too much there and I'm gonna need to do an adjustment. So let's do the intake first. None of these are that fun to really get to, I'll be honest with you. So since that feeler gauge went in just fine, no, it's not too tight, which I didn't think it was, being able to have a little play by hand there. And when the manual states from the center to the outside, it's kind of a tedious thing to do, and when I played around with it both ways, it didn't make that big a difference in what readings I picked up. Now, if I was close on a tolerance somewhere, I swear I try to like get the gauge back in there and kind of go center back out. But it's fairly close, especially if you're somewhere in the middle of a reading. It's not going to make that big a difference, but if you're close on tolerance, always follow the manual for how you check it to the T the best you can. That's real tight. That was a 0.13. If it's got more than 0.15, you're going to have to adjust. Let's see if we get 0.15 here. And here, this isn't a forceful thing, but if you can push it in there, again, it's not a forceful, you're not trying to pry an oversized feeler gauge in there, but if you can push or guide it in there, and it's still got a little play, it's time to go up to the next size. So what you're actually measuring here is you're at this position, how much slack you have between the valve rocker itself. So again, by being able to guide or slightly push the feeler gauge in, again, you're not trying to move the rocker or push the valve in, you're measuring what that distance is going up in size. And unfortunately here, I was able to slide a feeler gauge in past the clearance. So that is actually a tad over spec. So prime example, not much, but it's a smidge over. Motor wasn't making any noise. Now this is where they're saying this is going to be a specialty tool. We're not doing that. We're not buying said specialty tool. Now what I'm doing here is I went to a 0.06 millimeter, so I'm bringing it down closer to this, so once I get that adjustment done, it's going to be pretty close. Now this one, it'll probably be a 10 millimeter. I'm just breaking it loose so it's easier to adjust right here. Alright, so I loosened the nut a little bit right there. Now I'm going to tighten this. This is the adjustment. The nut is just what locks that adjustment in place. So. Now you don't want it so tight like I did just there that I can't slide the feeler gauge back and forth. So that one is right at the point where I can slide that feeler gauge in and out, and that's on a 0.06. So if I can slide a 0.06, it's somewhere between that 0.02 and that 0.06 right there. Now this is where the specialty tool does kind of come in handy, but you don't have to have it. I'm going to hold that at the exact same position, and that's key, and you can recheck this when you're done. That's kind of the equivalent of what they're doing with that specialty tool in the picture there. The thing you don't want to do, or you want to recheck it, is if say you slip this wrench a little bit with the nut turning while you're trying to get that final lock in there and you go too tight, that's why you recheck your clearances here. It's easy enough to do. So, and if you do mess it up and you go too tight, just back it off, readjust, and retighten down till you get it correct. So we're going to go back to 0.04. If we remember, 0.02 is the minimum of our clearances there. I think I may have did just what we was talking about there.
And on the flip side, if you do get it too tight, that's where you can't slide the filler gauge in. So you can be too loose or too tight. Again, if you can't put the filler gauge in there, that means you've went too tight and need to readjust.
Yep. So at some point I let it turn with the wrench there. Again, no biggie. Jump up to a 0.08 to give myself just a little more leeway there. See, it don't take much adjustment there to be in or out there. Like that, just that little bit of a twitch there was enough for it to be tight or too tight on that filler gauge. So. And that's why that specialty tool is what it is, because it helps you keep the adjustment locked in place while you tighten the nut. But you can do it without it, but again, if you over snug it and you change your adjustment, you're gonna have to be prepared to redo it. Ain't a big deal.
The process is going to be exactly the same for the exhaust side. I did end up adjusting that one, but it's hard to see or video it from that side.
We got that 0.404 adjustment, so, and I can already tell it's not gonna go too crazy, but here you go, we'll try 0.06. And this if we are trying to find exactly the number. As long as you're within the range, you're good. So it's 0.06, and that's starting to get slightly slow. So if this motor is ran and the adjustment has opened up, I want to go to the tighter end, because that appears to be how this valve is going to go over the time. It's just going to open up, not close down. I'm going to jump up to 0.10 millimeter. Yep. And again, it's not something like you want to force your filler gauge up in there until it breaks. Like that's it's not that. It's just going to be a slight tension. You can slide it in and out and move it. That's what you're looking for. It's kind of a feel thing. But in this case, if I can put a 0.04 or 0.06 in there, but a 0.10 is not going to slide in there, I'm somewhere between that 6 and 10, so probably an 8 or 7, but I'm in that lower range of the adjustment, so I feel confident running this machine for a good bit longer. And then same thing, if I check the exhaust side and it's getting tight, I may go to the loose. If it's naturally tightening, I may go to the looser end of the range if it's that motor is naturally going one way or another in that adjustment. All right, so we got that one adjustment. The exhaust is the exact same process. It's just not going to be easy to see. But keep in mind your clearances are different. We just did the intake and we got it probably around a 0.08 millimeter, and we're going to check the exhaust, and the same thing. The difference is the range. Your starting range is the same. How much play you can have it. If what we had checked just now, if that had been the exhaust and not the intake, we would have been fine. Now you can put both of them in the same range, so if I adjusted both of these to like a 0.08 or something, but the big thing is your intake is 0.15 is max. Your exhaust, you've got a little bit more play you can have there. So, but the adjustment is the exact same way, and it's a little bit more tricky if you do have to do the exhaust. Alright, so that one was the same way. It was a little bit on the loose side, so I adjusted it down to about a 0.06. I used a screwdriver, this, and then there's my other wrench. This right here, and you can kind of see, I could kind of get at it a little bit of an angle to do the adjustment with the right screwdriver there. And then I had the filler gauge and kind of did my final snug there, and then of course I rechecked it to make sure,
because I could kind of get a little bit of a small screwdriver in there, but it was kind of hard to get a good hole back and then get that final snug. But I got the final snug, and of course rechecked it. If it had been too tight, I'd readjust it. But that's the valve clearance. I'm gonna throw some O-rings, reverse the process.
Now you do want to replace the O-ring. The easiest way to do that is just a little pick tool. Pop it in there, get them out. Now, I've seen people reuse them. You can get by with it, but for a few bucks, why not? You're already here. And the part number 91301-428-003. That's the OEM part number. I'm sure there's probably aftermarket or a standard size for that too if you dig around enough. Now, when you put new O-rings, I always just take just a little cap of oil right here. I'm just running around. You know, it'll be crazy. Just a nice little coating of oil right there. I hope it go on, seal butter. And I got a Toque Spec for this. It's one of the things, I just get it good and snug. If you turn enough wrenches, you kind of got to feel from stuff like this, but nothing you need to go medieval. The O-ring is actually what's going to seal. To the You got torque values for just about everything. That appears to be 9 foot-pounds. And both of these you should be able to start by hand and run right up to the O-ring. You shouldn't be really fighting with it. If you are, go back, take a look at it, make sure you got the O-ring seated all the way. It's the most likely culprit. Alright, so for that little indicator, that's going to be part number 913-303-377-000. Same thing. Just like anything, if it's got an O-ring on it and I pull the cap, I'm going to go ahead and put a fresh one on it. Same thing, gonna dip that in a little oil there. Getting snug. Now on the crankcase cover bolts, the gasket stuck to this, and it left like a little bit of, you can kind of feel it with your fingers there. So I'm just going to kind of scuff that off real quick. And if you notice, there's no groove in here. The groove is inside the crankcase, and I'll show that here in a second. But I'm going to stick the O-ring on that so it's placed. But if you put it on here and you just tried to push it up, there's a good chance you could mess up the alignment there. Part number for the back crankcase is 91301-HR3-A40, and it looks like right there it's a 58x3 would be the size. And same thing, I'm gonna coat just a little bit of oil on it. Again, that is grooved, so it is holding that O-ring in place correctly for me to start installing the bolts.
Here it probably looked like I was hugging the four-wheeler, but I'm over top. One arm is reaching around one way, one arm's reaching around another way, trying to get this started. I kind of think that's about the best way to go at it. And once I got that first one started, I'm actually lifting and filling to make sure I didn't bump and move the O-ring out of the seated position it's supposed to be.
When I'm peeking, it's making sure before I start tightening the rest of these bolts down that I did in fact have the O-ring in the correct position here. And you should be able to run all these bolts pretty close to being snug by hand. But if you screwed one of them down and you notice it was kind of kicked one way or another, it's a sign that maybe at the last moment the O-ring is kind of popped back out at you. That's it. And that's got, you want to see the torque specs, that's the 2 spark plugs that's recommended in the manual. Of course, others should be compatible. This is, if you go directly off the, that's going to be the factory Denso plug, which I think either one of these make good spark plugs. Now, these always come pre-gap nowadays. It's a good idea to check them. So with these, you don't go like cranking it in there, you just slide it till it stops. So it's about 0.39, so we right there at the in the specs that we're supposed to be. And again, this is inch, not metric there, so we're good. Now the spark plug is a 5/8. It's like just about anything lefty loosey, righty tighty. And it's a good idea to always, when you're changing your spark plugs, take a look at it. It can indicate you may have some other conditions, running rich, lean, can be a telltale. And that looks perfectly normal for the miles and time that's on there. Now, if you wanted to, you could always, if you got a decent spark plug, you could always throw that in the box and throw that in a Ziploc bag in a machine or something like that. That way if you're out on the trail, maybe if you accidentally get a little too deep in some water or something happens and the spark plug needs to be changed, you might have a fresh one on the bike. Depending on what type of riding you might do, might be a good idea. You never know. Or like if it was started to run rich and it fouled a plug, having an extra plug to change is never really have it, don't need it. So we're going to put a little anti-seize, we're going to put on the threads there. Always a good idea. Again, I showed you the torque specs, but it's just one of those. Get it snug and a kind of a quarter turn, or you gotta get a feel for it. But if you're unsure, just throw the torque spec on it. I guess for proper YouTube, we can do the torque spec. And again, our torque spec is 16 foot-pounds. We got the old dial gauge. We're going to spin it up to we're 15 and 0. So that is 15. We're going to go one more. That's 16. Lock it in. And always keep an eye out, foot-pounds here. Depending on torque wrenches, some specs may be inch-pounds. So definitely don't want to make that easy enough mistake, but can be very, very bad things. You can see that click right there. That's indicating we've hit 22, so that's the proper way to torque it. And then my next tip is always take it, and the spark plug is over here where we just did that, just did the valve adjustment. But always take a little dielectric grease, squirt up in that boat before you seat it in. It's always a good tip. Next one's always a good one to check. It's going to be this little plug right here. Now, if you do a lot of water ride and stuff like that, like you can see, that's fairly clean in there. Might be able to knock a little dust out of there, nothing crazy. But I have seen these like plumb full of mud and stuff, depending on what type of terrain you're riding. And it's not a bad idea just to occasionally check for that. I did have a buddy that this popped out, or maybe somebody was being mean and pulled it, but he went in some water and sucked it right up through there because he didn't have the plug on. You can always clean that out and put it back. All right, we're cleaned out, and if you can tell, like, that's clear enough that the idea is if you do your walk around check for it, you can take a peek there, and if you see water or something, hey, maybe you got a little deeper than you thought. Pop your air box and check and make sure you're not about to hydrolock something, or you got a bunch of crud and stuff up in your air box you need to clean out. But yep, simple enough. Filter itself, you got 6 little tabs. You're just going to flip those back, then 2 in the center. It's going to allow you to actually pop your air box off. Is another reason I recommend really cleaning the machine. You wouldn't want to pop that and then just be dumping dirt and debris. Now this one is fairly clean. I'm going to go ahead and throw a fresh one on it. Part number is 17254-HN1-000. And I'll show the instruction. Honda does have an instruction for cleaning and oiling this if you want to. Not too crazy to buy aftermarket or even OEM filter in this case. But, see, just a little bit, but actually, if it wasn't for the point of the video, I'd probably keep running that. But like this, I'm doing all my maintenances, so I'm good and cleaned up. Now the thing to check on, you got a little sponge kitchen. This is part of that system right there. That might have just a little bit of oil. And that's normal. Can't see. Sure you can see where that came from there. That's just a little foam piece I always check and squeeze out there. Got a little metal inside that can be a little fun to get out, so you're going to pop your O-ring. Just kind of pushing it down on something and forcing it is going to pop that out. Now Honda, I'll show the owner's or the service manual instructions on this. Honda does have instructions for cleaning it. If you do clean it, you're still going to want to pull this before you soak and do everything with your filter and re-oil there. Same thing. I think some of the aftermarkets you don't have to run this depending on how the filter is designed. But yeah, if you do decide to go aftermarket, I'd read the instructions. If you need to, you probably take and put a screwdriver or something just to, once you get it started, it becomes easier. But that first little bit on fresh rubber can be aggravating. And do be careful. I should probably actually be wearing gloves. You can, the metal on these is pretty sharp. There we go. Once you get started, it becomes a whole lot easier. Like anything. And then that right there is going to be tucked out. Don't forget your clamp. With this, you kind of just keep working it till you get everything situated correctly between the metal and the rubber. There we go. And sometimes, yeah, what I'm doing is working my fingers in there. The metal you want to go inside the rubber, and then this rubber goes on the out. So it's metal, this boot, and then this one is the correct formation. And make sure, and you kind of have to play with the boot to get around the metal. Once you get this boot on the outside of the metal, I'm trying to take it back off, but you can see it's rubber to rubber there. Once you get that boot, the metal going there, this one slips on fairly easy, but that's typically the struggle on that little bit of a connection there. Nothing too crazy, but might have to play around with it just a little bit. But that is what ensures that you do have a good seal, and that's what you definitely want. You definitely just don't cram it in there and tighten it down and not have that order correct, because that's where you're gonna be pulling dust and everything. If it makes it past that seal right there, there's no filter, it's just right inside your motor there. So it is important that you do it right. Snug that clamp down, doesn't have to be crazy. That's not going anywhere. All right, let's find those instructions. And of course, if you're in there's dusty sand, snow, they're telling you check and clean this more often. And there's that metal canister there. There's that little filter pulled, and this is giving you the instructions if you was going to, you know, wash and squeeze it out, and then you would use the Pro Honda foam and put it in there. Again, the air filter wasn't that crazy expensive, but you can clean these per Honda in their service manual there. And then that goes that little check that we did. And then as far as putting the cap on, that's the exact same reverse process there. Stick it on. Click, click, voila, air filter changed. Now, this fun one here. Should slide in pretty easily. Once again, we'll just slide that little screw, which I'm not gonna lie, this is an aggravating one to do. So I've got the Phillips coming in from one way, and then I have a screwdriver on the other side to kind of hold it in where I want it while I'm starting to tighten it, because what I wouldn't want the clamp to do is roll around in a bad position where I couldn't get to it to finish tightening it. Alright, so we're snug back there. Start putting some more stuff back. That's the reason I went ahead and did the spark plug and air filter. If you're going to have this stuff loose, if you can get to other stuff easier in the process, you might as well go ahead and do multiple maintenances in one shot. Alright, so we're going to take there. I always suggest, if you can, like, you know, if you're doing a project like this, block off some time to where you can kind of get at it in one shot. If you did this and then didn't realize you didn't have a gasket or a filler gauge, or, you know, whatever tool might be, and it sits down in your shop for a week or some weeks, all of a sudden, remember where all this stuff goes becomes a little bit funner in the process. I always like putting the hardware back where it was so I remember it. There's that other sensor. I gotta make sure I've got my other sensor here. Some here. Click the sensor in back next to the spark plug. The two things you want to get back is the sensor and then the spark plug. Route it back in before you get locking this in. And you got two little tabs here. We got a bolt there. I'm trying to do my best to keep the camera on what's going on. Which of course, as I move or change angles, it changes maybe where the camera should be. Get that slid back in. We'll finish routing that spark plug around. Get two little connection point there. I remember a conversation about like having a little dielectric grease. Like having a little dielectric grease. Just do a little bit in there, you gotta go crazy. There we go. A little bit of a cork. And the same thing, we'll route that back. Now I'm gonna add the wires on this side to clear the plastics, and that's for my winch and stuff right there. That's not factory. That in the light bar, so that spark plug installed. Now this is gonna kind of be just reverse order here. This is at ECM. Honda did put it kind of up nice and high. Probably because they know people are going to do dumb stuff like four-wheeling and whatnot. Oh, I got to flip it around here. They said they're going to put the component that they don't want to get wet the highest and hope for the best. Notice this little thing right here is just going to slide in there. You're here, click, and the same thing for that little release. Can be a little fun. You might have to work with the angle. And I'm taking this screwdriver and pushing it up to where it can just get started. Is what I'm trying to get it to do here. Or if you can get a finger around in there. There we go. There we go. When she clicks, she's good. If this was for the plug, so if you remember, we had that little piece right there that clipped in. Try to show, but bam, that's going to push back in. Again, route your hose back the way it was. And you can always look for like little telltale marks, because if it does have a connection, a lot of times that will be clean. That will kind of give you a little hint, hey, this needs to go here or there. But always look for those telltale signs. This one will route back. Use some little pliers again. Voila. I was like kind of looking over everything, make sure I ain't got nothing loose. Which nice thing about me doing a video, if I had missed something, I could always go back and look at it. One little vent hose here. Let's get that taken care of. Yep, that's everything back together from here. It'd just be throwing the cover back on. So we're doing an oil change. First thing we're gonna do is we're gonna start the ATV up, let it run for a few minutes. That's just to get the oil nice and warm. That way when you pull the plug, it just comes out. It ain't gotta be extended, just give it a few minutes. Then when you cut it off, we're gonna drain it. It sounds so good after that valve adjustment. It didn't sound really bad before, but can't really tell any difference. We've given it a few good minutes idle time there just to warm up. When you go to get the plug, you go right underneath here. And it's going to be that big center one. It's going to be a 17 millimeter for that. Of course, make sure you got some type of pan to catch it. It's not going to be as much as a car, but you know, take a decent little lefty, loosey, righty tighty like always. I like kind of keeping a little upward tension as I can. That way, hopefully keeping oil off my fingers till I'm ready to pull it, just like that. And we are going to put a new washer on that. But, let that drain. Now to help it vent, you can go ahead and pull this. Alright, so this is going to be your filter. This is going to be an 8 millimeter. It's going to be 3 bolts. And this is just having a pan under this section, which I've already drained the oil, so it ain't gonna be a whole lot, but do expect some. Kind of back and forth, just kind of lightly here. You can twist it, and it's got that O-ring, all nice and easy. There is a spring that will sit back in there, so that's why I like doing it like nice and slow. But I'm gonna go ahead and stick that spring back in there. That's the old oil filter there. And then same thing, we're gonna pop this O-ring and put a fresh one of those on. Now, same as before. Use the little pick tool. Pull the O-ring off. I'm going to match that up. Now, as far as part numbers, I did get a Neutron oil filter on this one. 124554003, which there's a lot of different oil filters that you can get. Now, compared to the Honda, again, it looks, yeah, same filter, but it does have a nice stamping. It says this side and spring toward engine, outside filter cover. So this one's, you know, kind of got you covered. This one you need to kind of pay attention. So they got the same O-ring and stuff there. A lot of stuff I'll use Honda, you know, depending on if I can find it or not. Now the O-ring, well, they stamp that, doesn't it? Guessing that would be the part number, but a 54 by 2.4. coat that a little bit here. Alright, I'm going to show part numbers for this O-ring here. That's going to be this little one right here. A lot of kits and stuff will have, like, include the O-rings, like if you get it on Amazon or something like that. Put a little oil on it. It'll hold it in place pretty nicely. You should be able to push it up pretty flush. Run all the hardware in by hand and then give it a snug. I'll show the manual description for this, but I'm just going to go what feels snug. Voila. So that is going to be a little washer for the drain valve. This one's the same way. You should be able to screw it in just about all the way and just give your final snug with the wrench. Get snug, but don't go crazy. You are going into aluminum. Alright, so this is just the general maintenance for checking. Again, start engine and let idle 3 to 5 minutes. If it's really cold, idle an additional 5 minutes. But a lot of people don't follow the oil changes correctly. Now this is your spec. That GN4 4-stroke. It's going to be the important part there. And the viscosity can vary depending on your temperature range. So I'm going to be running 10W40 because around here we never see lower than -10 degrees. If you need that torque spec, again, 18 foot-pounds, nothing crazy. Don't go wild on the engine case, and last thing you want to do is strip one of those. Yeah, we put that new washer there. And then for it seems like some kits will forget about that little O-ring there, but it's a good idea to put fresh O-rings there and there when you do it, just like we did. A little oil on it. All right, so we've done everything. We just need to fill it up. Now there's different oil capacities depending on what you've done. If you just drain after filter change, which is what we just did, so that's going to be 3.2 US quarts. And also depends on if you have the foot shift model or the DCT. If you have the DCT, you're going to have more oil, and that's why the numbers are higher there. So again, do a Google search if you don't know which one of your models you are, but that's how you're going to determine how much oil you need for this oil change. And just a quick note on oil, like, you do need to make sure that the oil that you're running meets the standards that's set up here. So like in this one, API service classifications SG or higher. So this is the oil I'm running. It's API SL, which the SG was an old standard from 1989. This new standard is the updated standard from 2001, so we're good there. And I run AMSOIL. I've had great luck with that. Even like looking at wear pattern and stuff like that. But you know, run whatever oil you want to. Make sure you hit this classifications. I've had good luck with Honda oil. I've had great luck with AMSOIL. Recommend either one of those personally. But do make sure that you are hitting whatever the standard is. And then the other big one, which is part of the standard, is wet clutch capable. If you go put a car synthetic oil in an ATV that's got a wet clutch, it's not going to be a good experience whatsoever. You're going to mess something up. If you're running something with clutches, it needs to be wet clutch capable. That oil is different than your regular, you just walked in and grabbed something off a Walmart shelf. It has to be the right certification. Just an important tidbit.
Know the amount that you're filling up and then count off. This bottle has the little hashtag marks on it. Make sure you're using quarts and not the metric unit, or vice versa, however you measure your stuff.
Alright, so let it run the allotted time. 5 minutes. Again, if you're in a colder climate, let it run another 5 minutes. And then let it sit for 2 to 3 minutes. Stick it in without screwing in. And then check it, and we're right there at the full mark like we're supposed to be. So that is beautiful. I do always recommend double checking your oil levels after you do oil change. Just make sure you did fill it correctly, everything drained. Never a bad idea. Alright, next one we're going to drain is going to be the differential. And as you're looking at it from underneath, there's just going to be a little hole in the factory plastics there where you can easily access that. And this is going to be a 10 millimeter. Righty tighty, lefty loosey, like normal. Voila. And that I do like letting it be alone for a while. Just kind of check it, run my fingers through it, make sure. If you go to drain your gear oil and you see a bunch of metal flakes or something, that's a sign that, hey, maybe something's going on. It may not be long for the cause, but that looks great like normal. Then if you're the fuel plug is going to be a 17. Let me show you where that is. Right there. That's going to be on the back side. Just don't need a lot of extension, but just a little bit will get you there. Trying to get a good position where I'm not going to, when it comes loose, I ain't going to kick my hand in the process. There goes the cap. I'm going to let those drain for a little bit. And the washer did stay stuck. So if you pull this and you don't see your washer, check to make sure it's not stuck, because you wouldn't want to go double stacking washers like that. May not seal correctly. Alright, that's going to be the part number for the seal for the bottom of the differential there. 90471-580-000 8mm gasket, which again you can probably cross-reference that to some aftermarket stuff on cheaper. Yeah, decently snug, not too crazy. The cap itself, the fuel cap, it's got that O-ring that should be replaced. The part number for that is 91302-001-020. I feel like these are going to be the same front and back if I remember correctly. Same thing with that one, just take that kind of a little dab of oil or axle grease there and run it around. Ooh, it's submerged now. Of course, we need to fill it first before we put the cap on. We got it ready to roll. So this is, well, I guess I'll jump over to the rear and show both. Of course, you want these to be on level grounds, not high. And it doesn't take a lot of ounces after draining, 4.2. That's just the front. Now the high poured gear oil, 8090. So, yeah, and that's straight out of Google there. You know, as long as you're running a good oil. The one I'm actually running in my ATVs is the Marine Gear Lube. The thing I like about it that you might run across, and hopefully this really isn't the case because you probably need to replace the seal, but this delivers exceptional wear protection even when contaminated up to 10% water. So again, we do creek crossing, stuff like that. If a little water did get in your rear end, and I've run across this where a little water gets in there, you don't realize it, the quality of the gear oil is shot, and before you know it, like bearings or stuff is going, and that's when you realize it and you have an actual problem. Whereas something like this, I feel like if you just got a little bit of water in there off a creek crossing or something, that might be the difference in just changing the oil the next time or having an issue potentially. That's why I like it. Now what you see, this is gonna be hard for me to kind of get on video, and I like the little packs too because it's easy to get back in here, but you're just gonna start pouring oil in there, and whenever it hits that top of that lip where the thread is or starts overrunning, that's when you know you got a full differential, you're good to go. Now if you see right here, these little pouches make it super easy to fill differentials in most applications. Now they do have little hand pumps if you need them. Another trick, you can take a piece of rubber hose and put it on the end of the bottle cap if you have the traditional bottle that you maybe can't fit back in here. See that there, once you've got the gear all up to that full state right there and it's just floating, little extras running down, that's where you know you're good to go. Won't take much. Same thing, you should be able to run it up pretty close. O-ring's what's going to seal, so you're just going to snug it from there. Well, let's do the front. Alright, so the front, just the location is going to change slightly. We're going to go back under here. Right there's going to be your drain plug. That time the washer came with it, but always look for that. You notice on that one the O-ring stayed with the diff, so again, always look for your O-rings. Last thing we do is have 2 O-rings or 2 sealing washers, so make sure you pull them to quick brush. Same part number there. fresh sealing washer. For the cap. We'll let that drain, then fill her back up. Alright, so we'll let everything drain pretty good.
Here, if you notice, just a little gear oil is dribbling out, so if you filled it up enough that it's starting to run back out the threads again, you're full, throw the cap on, you're ready to roll.
Alright, so anytime you're doing maintenance, it's always a good idea to check everything. So I always go in here, I feel my tie rods for slack, bushings, ball joints. A lot of times you can tell a ball joint if you can do that. Now, I already broke the other side down. Mine actually isn't the ball joint, it is the wheel bearing. I'll show you what that other side, I pulled the little pin there, but yeah, you can tell that's no good, no bueno. Still got ball bearings in there, still rolling, but it definitely had too much slack this time for it. But yeah, we're gonna break everything down. Brakes. That's the video. Now, I know some people might say, hey, you're using impact, you need to use an impact socket. This is pretty tight as far as clearance with the wheels go, and this ain't a high torque, so yeah, ideally you do always want to use an impact socket.
Now, for some reason, the chrome finish on these have always made it a little extra snug coming off, but throwing it down, that's just a little trick. Not whether it's a piece of dirt or grit or whatever, but fairly common practice to use lug nuts for some reason. And also, if you restart them and you wiggle the socket, that's the other way I've found these particular lug nuts will kind of come off easy.
I'm gonna give you my tips and tricks as far as doing some of this stuff. Now, one of the things, if you are doing brakes, that may make it a little easier. And some stuff I do may not be exactly how the manual says, but kind of one of those, use your own judgment, or I'm using my experience / judgment on some of this. Using an H5 or 6mm, either one should work here. And some of the stuff don't matter that much in order, but some of it you can actually save yourself a decent amount of time doing stuff in certain ways. I've got the jack stand for safety, but the way I drive this machine, if I'm that worried about it being on top of me or the weight, I probably shouldn't drive it the way I do sometimes. Shit. Now a car side by side, when you start getting into this, if I had to, I could pick the corner of it up. Never a bad idea, safety first though. There's certain hardware, and I'll show you the manual, where Honda will, say, hey, get new bolts for this or whatever. Some of that stuff I will just blue lock tight and re-put it together. Now that we have that's freed up, there's 2 pins in here. What they do is they actually hold the brake pads on. If you notice, it went crazy, but it took a little effort to. If you ain't got impacts and stuff handy, I'm doing most of this. You ain't got that stuff, but and you don't have to take it all the way out until you're ready to do the pads, but just loosen them at least. And just for time's sake, I am going to cheat. And if you have an impact, getting these out by hand ain't that big a deal. I mean, getting them out with the impact ain't that big deal, but if you have to do that by hand, these sometimes can be a little aggravating to hold back on if you got the brake caliper in your hand at the time you're trying to pull the pins there. Stick all those together in the same spots. Now the brake caliper itself is going to be 2 bolts here and here. It's 12, if I remember correctly. I'll try to do sizes. These were 10s here. Yep. Now normally I'm a fan, if you take a bolt out somewhere, you go ahead and throw it back in the component so it's easy to get to. Now in this case, the wheel bearing's bad. That's something to keep in mind cost-wise. The wheel bearing's bad. Ball joints feel pretty good. Has got some miles, got some use on it. So I was kind of, hey, if I'm gonna be here, I might just go ahead and do ball joints. But the wheel bearing from Honda, I think, was 80. The ball joint was like 20 bucks. This whole assembly was 100 and some change. So it was not too far off from the cost, and then I don't have to mess with pressing this bearing out. You can get aftermarket bearings cheaper. I did want to go back with the Honda stuff here. Now the other one I'm going to go ahead and take is going to be this right here. It should be an 8mm. 8mm. Now, if I was just trying to do the brakes, I wouldn't need to take this loose, but I'm getting to, and it's the same process if you need to pull an axle, and I'm going to show kind of a few little shortcuts and stuff there that help you out here in that scenario. Now, I'm not going to change the A-arm, so I'm going to throw that back in there, just keep up with it. Me trying to actively record and move stuff around can always be a little fun. Now you should have a quarter pin in here, hopefully. And I always try to straighten that out the best I can. Needle nose or dikes work pretty good. Sometimes dikes seem like they, when I say dike, like cutters like these, they seem like they get a little better bite depending on what you're doing. But either will typically get you about where you're trying to go. And with dikes, you can get, in my opinion, potentially a better grip just doing it like that. But all right, now this one is going to be a 30mm. If you need to pull that axle, that hub assembly here. This is one if you have an impact, that is handy to have. Now, if you didn't, your 2 tricks here, if before you pull your brake off, you could brake clamp it, or in this case, it's a Rubicon, so I could put diff lock in, which is actually what I've got it in right now, just for doing these assemblies. Since I'm changing the hub assembly, I'm going to have to pull these 3 according to my Craftsman sets. That is a 5mm. And one, you know what tools you need to get if you don't have, if you're tackling this, and 2, if you have the exact same machine, I like having, I'll have like a little emergency kit. Again, some stuff you can go on Amazon or like Home Depot, you can walk in and buy individual Husky sizes. So if you know you need like 6 or 7 different sizes, I might buy those sockets or wrenches and just throw them in a little emergency bag for my machine. Never a bad idea to have a complete tool set, but if you're tight for space or time, it's always a easy way to accomplish that. And same with these. Honda says one-time use. I'm gonna throw a little blue Loctite. Now the ones I don't play around with is tie rods and ball joints. Or like if I ever pull hardware and it's kind of funky, but like worst case scenario, I mean, heck, I might ride the trail next time and a rock get thrown up in the wheel housing and miss this whole assembly. Little cut plastic cover up. Don't know. Alright, so from here, we are going to also have to pull the tie rod. That's the next one I'm going to work at here. Now this one, the piece isn't all the way through. When I say all the way through, it's just through the threads on this one. It's not through it like a castle nuts, which I'll show you that on the ball joints. Now this is a one-time use nut that I do not recommend reusing or just throwing Loctite. That could get you in bad spots. I believe, let's see, 17. Yep, so 17 for that nuts. Got a little overzealous. It's lefty loosey, righty tighty. Now, if you ever do Honda tie rods and you do the inners in here, it is reverse thread. So do keep that in mind. Lefty loosey, righty tighty. Reverse threads up there is typically how most Honda ATVs are. I don't know if you probably can't tell that on camera, but this is another 17. And it's slotted right in here, so that will help you. Also, again, I'm doing this by hand just to, for most of this, I'll grab the impact to speed some stuff up, but to kind of show you don't necessarily have to have an impact, but the little tricks and tips to get it done. And if you do have to give it a little love tap, make sure you have like a halfway decent amount of threads before you do it. A lot of times you don't have to go crazy on a tie rod. Alright. Now we're over to the side here. It's ideal if you can keep your brake caliper supported, not to have it let a few hang over a few projects. And if you was going to do your brake fluid, this is where I'd get one of those little suction kits, put it there. I top mine off as I'm pulling fluid. I don't need to do it on this machine, but if you're at that service and you decide to do it while you're here especially, it's a good time. Just go ahead and do that. Now the bottom one. Now you're going to have to pull one of these if you have to get to an axle. You don't have to pull both, and I'm going to show you a trick on that. You're always putting new in, so if you get a little rough with one of these, just trying to get it out and get enough to work with. And if you do have an impact handy, I would advise having it. This will speed this process up. It might be another 17. Yep. Again, one-time use nuts, putting that in the pile. Now this is where some people will go to beating and banging if they're changing the ball joint and don't care about it. This is the Tusk tool. A couple manufacturers kind of make the same thing, same idea. If you were doing this for an axle, you would need to be a little bit more careful about how evil you get with this, or tough, because you wouldn't want to damage that boot if you could help it, because if you do damage the boot, that's where you're going to be changing it. Now again, an impact would speed this up quite a bit. Nope. Well, you're home free there. So easy peasy, not abusive. So if I didn't have the whole assembly, I didn't damage that boot right there, and I won't be any extra careful or anything with it. Now next step I'm gonna do, I'm about to get some ratchet straps out, and I'm gonna show you how I'm doing that, because it actually will make everything easier to get to this section here. So, this is gonna be, I believe, 14. Yep, so 14. Curious Honda putting the, I guess they engineers do everything for a reason, but a lot of times when working on helicopters, most bolts, we would always put in general use of direction. And I think you'd be fine doing this one the same way. If you were bouncing down a trail and the nut came off, as you're going along, you're doing more forward movement, so it's easier for it to shimmy and then come back out. Very rarely are you going very fast from reverse, but I'm gonna put it back the way Honda had it. The only thing I can say maybe something to do with the chamfering or something, but I don't see. Technically that's a one-time use nut, but I'm not gonna do it like that. This is where a ratchet strap starts coming in handy to get stuff up out of your way. First thing to get out of my face is going to be this shock right here. The only thing to keep in mind is if you're working, let me see if it can, just keep in mind as you're working, that is above your head where it normally ain't if you're used to working on your four-wheeler. Hopefully I don't make that mistake myself. Now, if you were in this predicament here, and you just need to change an axle, you don't want to go breaking and fighting that stuff loose. This is where you can lift up on it, and now that axle is free and clear. You know, you get in there, yank on it. That's how I would do just an axle. Now, also getting to this, it makes it a little bit easier. Now the other thing I'm gonna go ahead and set up a ratchet for, and I'm gonna kind of go underneath and pull backwards on this A-arm. So go ahead and get this loose. You'll see in a second, like when I go to do the ball joint, having freedom here and here, and I've done it both ways. Like if you have a second set of hands, yeah buddy, hey, hold the A-arm up and this out of the way while I start tightening this. Would be easier with a second set of hands, not necessary. Same thing, I'm gonna grab lower joint. Just trust me from experience, it's a little bit of a time saver. It's worth the extra so many seconds. Now here, we can push that axle to the side. Can I easily get to it? This is going to be a 17. And this is where a crescent wrench may be your friend. And so basically what I'm doing is I'm grabbing a dog leg over here and I'm holding back as my force. Now if you had wobbly sockets, the other thing I'll do is I'll take a wobbly socket or extension or a swivel and put in there with the impact, and you can get that angle right there just fine. One-time use nut that I personally do not reuse. Now the other thing, you can kind of work your angle a little bit better for this tool. And this is just going to drop. Not that I'm worried about the hub, but if you was just going to rebuild the hub, that would be something to keep in mind. But again, don't care. Getting all new. And same thing. Has plenty of play. If you are going to press this, you can't really see it too well, but there's a little hole right there. That's where you take a pair of these pliers, pull that ring, that little ring inner lips right here, and then you would put it up on some type of vise or press with a big cup here, press down through, and then press it back in, make sure everything is good and square. Now with this, you can feel around like if you was in this position, like really ain't got much play. Nothing too crazy that I'd be worried about putting a decent amount more miles on it. But since I'm here, I'll go ahead and do this, and it's a good demonstration. If I'd done a better job of pressure washing, who knows, I might get through this immediately. If you need to, a little pick might be your friend too. You need to get the dirt out before you can do that, and that's part of my problem, is it's not wanting to go in deep enough. Ring ding ding. Not trying to go too crazy with this, but I'm trying to get it just where I've got my working space here. Now if you do this, typically don't carry a kit like this with me. Now if you do run across a need for this kit, in my experience, if you get like the universal one from the auto parts store, most side-by-side applications you can make work. And that's what this is. I rented this one from AutoZone. You want to get it as square as you can. And it does take some force with some ball joints, like you're not just going to smack it with a hammer or something a couple times, unless it's just wore out, or the A-arm that sits into is wore out.
If your ball joint just falls out of the A-arm, or you can easily push it back in without a forceful use of a tool like this, chances are that A-arm itself has got too much play and it's time for a new A-arm.
It was close to pressing up against that, so if you did run across that, you might have to stop for a second, get a bigger cup or something like that. But when I say cup, like the little piece here. Each of these seem to be a little different in design. All right, so now we got the whole one out. Now, for the money, I probably wouldn't hold on to this, but it wouldn't be a bad one for me to necessarily throw in my bag. And if I was especially mudding and stuff like that, I'd rather have this as a spare than nothing at all. Now, for 20 bucks or 30 bucks, whatever it was, I just assume almost buy a new one just to have on hand if I'll go through the trouble of installing. Now, this is part number 51375-HP5-601. This is going to be that ball joint. Now, if you have a buddy or a friend, this phone a friend time would be nice if you got it. If not, let me show you it's still doable.
Now, I've used AutoZone kit numerous times for side-by-side and ATV ball joints. Now, every now and again, I don't know if I haven't got something squared up just quite perfect or missing something slightly. Every now and again, I will nick up the starting part of the threads on the ball joint. I've always been able to chase it or fix it and still use said ball joint. But if anybody knows of a specialty tool that's better for ATVs or UTVs, drop in the comment. If you notice something slightly wrong I'm doing it, drop in the comments for others. I've pressed a ton of them like this, but every now and again I do run across that.
I ain't gonna say I'm gonna do this that easy, but if it takes a few times for you to get lined up correctly or whatever, do not beat yourself up about it. That is kind of par for the course here. And you want it as straight as you can. Sometimes it's hard to see, but kind of your telltale is when you start cranking on this, if it starts kicking or doing something funny, that's a sign that you're not squared up enough. Just back it out and retry your lever here, or your angle I should say. And if you get off cup too much right in here, sometimes it's going to try to push up and get that. If you just get to a point like it's going to take some force. Like you're going to have to put a little oomph behind it. But if it stops going or hangs all of a sudden, just pop it loose, see what you got. Might be something going on. Like it's hitting the lip of something somewhere else, or it's getting off angle. Typically once you get it started, it's going to kind of has to go true. It's so tight, but you have to start it semi-straight too. And if you're not all that strong, a little trick you can do is if you find another wrench about the same size, you grab it kind of like this, and then you've got extra leverage. So if you got a wrench set on, that's my little tip of the day there.
And with Honda ball joints, the other thing I would say, sometimes you don't feel a lot of play in the ball joint sometimes, but the joint will actually wear through the cap, and it's something that you can visually check or feel at the top of the caps or bottom of the caps. But if it wears, that joint wears through and you can see movement through that cap where it's wore through, it's time to replace the ball joint. With Hondas, a lot of times I've seen that be the case before you get a lot of noticeable slack.
Pretty close. And when you get fully seated, you're going to hit that point where it's just not going to go anymore. Again, if you don't have a feel for it, or you haven't done many, or if you hit that odd feeling, just stop. All right, so when you get that final push, your two telltales, I'm gonna try to zoom in as close as I can, but you should see that lip all the way around, and then where you can fit your finger, you shouldn't feel any gap. So when you go in there, that should be a flush item there. If it's not, you need to resituate your stuff. Now this little tab right here is going to be the reversed. Pop it out. And you should hear that. It should almost seat in. You should have heard that on the GoPro there, but it should be underneath that lip. If you can't get it underneath there, that's a sign that bearing, that you haven't got the ball joint pressed up enough. You need to stop and get it situated, pressed, squared up, whatever you need to do there. Something needs to be readjusted. Now we're getting back to pretty much the reverse procedure now. Now again, between the cost of the wheel bearing and that bottom ball joint, so I'm going to show you how this assembly comes. And sometimes with hubs, and I kind of think it was borderline with mine, if that bearing goes bad for so long, eventually you can start messing up the inner race too. As you start pushing bearings in and out multiple times, sometimes it's time to just get a new hub. But the cost of that, and that's already pre-installed, Not much more than I would have bought these two pieces for. Kind of makes that part a no-brainer. One-time use nut, and I have a kit that I'm going to pull another one from, but 90310-HB9-000. One-time new use nut there. So we'll do this. Now this one I am going to cheat and use the impact to run it up in here. As you go turning, it will spin. Now if you absolutely have to do this by hand, that's where if you have a friend that can push up or maybe put a jack underneath it, the more tension you're trying to put tension here, at some point you may have to almost put the assembly together, let the ATV sit back on the ground, and then get back in here if you can't get enough tension there. But this is one of those, impact's going to definitely get you close here. I don't know if you should be able to see it pretty good on camera, but this is what's called a swivel extension. Again, some type of swivel will get you right up in there. And I'm not torquing this. I'm not going crazy. I'm just running it up close enough to get the torque wrench on there, just to be sure. So actual torque is 21. And sometimes you do end up putting a little tension on the threads when you're pressing there. If your setup will allow you not to push directly on the threads, getting that bevel. Again, each of those setups just a little bit different, but just be careful as you can with the threads. The other side didn't have any issue. This one I actually pressed in a little bit, but got it to work all the same. And torque is 21. Now if you can see, I can actually push the cotter pin all the way through. Now if you couldn't, that's where you would want to maybe add just a little bit more snugness to it, just to align those holes. So 21, maybe a little bit more for the alignment of the holes. So from here, we're going to reverse putting the axle back in. Now before I do that, and I'll show the Honda Spec on the grease or whatever, but cut those spines. In. I'm going to release the tension there so we can bring that back up. This is a new package of one-time use nuts. It's just been in my backup bag forever, so not seeing the fancy color, don't flip out. It's new. And here, kind of the same thing. The more you pick up, the more tension you're adding. And at some point you'll have friction and you can just torque. This one. This back around here, we ain't quite ready for it yet. This is could be an older part number, 90305-HC4-000. Part of my order came in, part of it didn't. So I'm stealing from my backup emergency parts kit. And then the same thing on this one as you're tightening it up. These, you take that 17 up top. Toque Spec is 40 for this one. Same thing on that one. You're gonna have a hole here. That's where the carb pin goes, but it's not a castle nut like the other ones. Now on these, we're putting this little cover back. I am not buying, these are not new. If it fell off, and not that big a deal. But little stuff like this, Honda will suggest new hardware. Again, use your own judgment. I just throw a little bit of blue locker on there and send them back home. Now for these, Honda does suggest new hardware for like the covers and stuff like that. Like worst case scenario, if this fell off, I'm not that concerned with it. But you know, use your judgment, what's important to you, what risk you're willing to take. I've seen people reuse a lot of this hardware, but even myself, I did A-arms on a Pioneer and forgot to order the hardware. Went ahead and threw it in. And I was like, well, next Rocky Mountain or whatever order I do, I'll just buy some more and I'll put a new nut on it. And just totally slipped my mind. And we're in the middle of Arizona, and all of a sudden that nut decided to come loose and it dropped my A-arm. Luckily it does have one, but it's just one of those things. It can happen. And there's probably a reason engineers have it on there. And luckily with this one, there's only, as you're looking at it, there's only one way this can go, so there's no real way for you to mess it up. If you've lined the 3 holes up, that's where it's supposed to be. Maybe start one and to each, yeah. So the next thing we're going to slide on is going to be the caliper. Now, when you go to do the axle nuts, you'll notice there's a little silicone on it. And Honda actually recommends that you do that when you put it back on. I'm saying silicone, it's some type of sealant. I don't know the exact spec for that. Now, I've had plenty of buddies even that ride a lot in mud and this, that, and the other. They'll be at an ATV park, break an axle, throw an axle in really quick, and never really been an issue without doing it. It is a point of sealant, so it does help. Just scrape the old stuff away there. I'm using RTV sealant. Again, don't know exactly what Honda specifies. I think just about anything in the category will work fine. Like if I hadn't this was open around the shop, so that's why I'm using this time. If I had like some 100% silicone just around the shop, that's what I'd be using right now. This does have a Toque Spec as well, and it's going to be 101. And again, two ways to do this. Either put it in diff lock like I have, or have the brake on and have a friend hold it. And same concept, if you do this and you don't have a straight shot for the cotter pin, add just a little bit more if you need it, just to get around. We look like we are beautiful, I think. Using a longer cotter pin. Here we go. Alright, next we're going to start the brakes. Now, there's a few different tools as far as pressing calipers. My opinion, about as easy as anything. You just put it in there and then use a C-clamp. And part of the reason you do that, instead of just going right up against it, if it kind of walks a little bit, you wouldn't want to kind of mess up your seal. What do you think you're doing, Buckus? Away from that pit. So I'm going to show a close-up. Now if you notice this right here, that's a little piece of metal. It's got some tension on it here. Now as you push your brake pads in, or put them in, they may not line up with the pins for the guide pins there. And you may have to push that brake pad in a little bit to get those to start lining up. And then when you add the second one, you can do it. Like, I'm gonna try to show this the best I can, but I think this is gonna be one of those like catching the camera angle. But let me, this is one of those I might struggle to do this while trying to really show what I'm trying to do here. If you're pin pops, you can kind of see like right in there, like I'm pushing. And depending on how much tension that piece of metal has, this may be easier or harder, you know, to do. And if you notice, it was easy, like when I was pushing, I gave a decent amount of force and it went too far. Because you're going to have to do that same step with the second pad there. So make sure I get it flush. And the same thing, if you're trying to pull the pads out, you may have to push in. And the second pad gets harder because you're fighting from the tension of the first pad and the metal. You want to get it kind of close. And put the second pad in. Which, it's not that bad, but it's just one of those things if you don't know. And if you get at the right angle, you can kind of see from the side. All right, you see we just broke through just there. I'm gonna do the same thing there. Just a little more tension. There we go. And they're both in the guides there. If you just try to come back from the back side and just go pushing, these ain't set right, they may not want to make it all the way through there. And do not forget your little protective caps. Depending on how much mud and stuff you play with, I've had one or two of these that's been fun in the past to get out. Once you do that, again, these pads are on guides, so try to separate them the best you can. That way it makes it a little bit easier when you're trying to pop it back on the caliper. Go. I'm pretty sure it's the same thing with these two. Honda's going to say one-time use. I'll throw a little Loctite on them. Once you get everything pretty close situated, you're not fighting the guards and stuff, it's going to be pretty easy to move the caliper around. But the caliper is what's going to have to move around to get that alignment right. You know, it's one of those, don't go crazy with one and the other not be started. Get both of them good and started before you go cinching anything down. Alright, so get new brakes now. Same thing. Do what you prefer. And it's never a bad idea to put that fresh one-time use nut on. If not, never a bad idea to do some Loctite. nice and snug. Once you got done at this point, this is where you should go back over everything. Just look at everything before you throw that wheel on. Check, make sure you have put your ball joint nuts on, your tie rods. Make sure you got Carter pins everywhere they're supposed to be. Anything you unbolt it, just touch it. Grab, shift, just, you know, do a good look over. Make sure before you go throw the tire on and take it for a test drive. And again, if you decide to change brake fluid, it is recommended on certain intervals. Pull that cap, get the little tool. I'll show a picture of that. And as you're pulling fluid out of here, go back up to your reservoir. And if you do, also not a bad idea, check and make sure that you are full up here, because what could happen is you're pushing the caliper back a little bit, could potentially leak out of here, and that's what you're seeing right there. Just a little bit out there. If you do lose some out of this, make sure to top it back off. And again, if you're going to put fresh in, I would suggest pulling it from the individual points, and as you're pulling, keep putting fresh in, or have a second person watching this, topping it as you're pulling it in. That's the easiest way I found to do that. Now I'm going to put the wheel back on. Of course, I'm going to torque that as well. That's pretty simple stuff there. Now, one thing to keep in mind, and I had this issue myself. Dixie, what are you doing, girl? You come here. You say hey to everybody. Shop helper right there. #1 supervisor. But the torque specs are different from aluminum steel wheels, and even Honda does this. Now, if you look in the owner's manual for this machine, I believe it only lists one torque spec. Now, I'll show a picture, but if you bought the aftermarket aluminum wheels, if yours came with steel, there's a different torque spec for aluminum, and that's just kind of in general how that works on the ATVs. Now, the issue I had is I put MSAs on, riding around, thought I heard some noise somewhere, and I thought, you know, like, couldn't really describe it, but I didn't feel like it was something necessarily in the suspension, maybe a driveline component. I'm like, hey, it's under warranty. I'm gonna drive it like I'm wanting to see what breaks here, and hit a jump. And when I did, I seen something silver come out the corner of my eye, and it was actually the lug nuts taken off. And before I landed, all the lug nuts that came off and the wheel shot off. Now I managed to put my weight just right, basically land it, and this was on the other side, it's the one that did it. But when it landed, I kept hard enough weight on one side, and in the back corner, they didn't quite, you know, it didn't really sit down. I actually drove the bike for, it's hard to say how many feet, but, you know, 75 to 100 feet. And as I was driving, keeping the weight after I landed, eventually I came up to a tree line. In the last few feet, I got into the brakes, pretty decent. It sat down, and it scrubbed the last, you know, few feet to stop. Like, people behind me didn't even notice what happened. But the issue is I torqued it per spec of what the steel wheels was, but I had just switched to aluminum, and it backed out. And looking on more forums and stuff, a lot of people's had that issue. So if you do have aluminum, at least do the Honda spec. Me, I go a little bit above that. In my opinion, I think the studs are rated, you know, big enough that they should handle a few more PSI. So I go, me personally, I go closer to that 80 mark, which is above both Toque specs, but MSA for their wheels. And again, each wheel, and where's one of my, depending on how the cone is, again, aluminum steel is different. Your cup here, I don't see where these shouldn't handle 80 foot-pounds, and since that's the kind of the base recommendation from MSA, that's typical of a torque mine. Again, do your own individual research on that. The main thing that I'm trying to say or show or get you to think about, if you're going aftermarket rims, especially if you're switching from steel to aluminum, the torque spec's going to vary. Whether you go, and again, Honda's torque specs for aluminum wheels is on a Honda wheel, so just keep that in mind. Different wheel, different lug cone design, stuff like that can all vary that somewhat. But all right, so for the rear brakes, it's going to be a 12 millimeter, and you're going to have two bolts that's going to be opposite of each other. One's going to be on the bottom, the other one's going to be counter at the top. This is lefty-loosey, righty-tighty, just like anything else, or most things. Now, I think this is showing it good enough. This is turning on its own. But if you notice, every now and again, this will turn too. It's still unthreading itself, but you may have to put a wrench or something wedged up in here to kind of hold back if it doesn't go by itself, which this one so far. You notice this does have like a factory squealer here. This pad actually has, you know, pretty decent life for what it is. The backing plate is coming apart. These are the factory pads, so I can't really complain. Alright, so I'm going to try to do a little bit of a close up. So the rear can be a little tricky. This right here actually rotates out. As that pad wears, this comes out farther and farther. Now when you change and put new pads on, you're going to have to get that to reset. Now the way you get this to reset, and it's going to be kind of hard for me to show, is you screw this in clockwise. Now Honda has got some type of specialty tool to do this. I'm not buying a tool to do one set of brakes every 5 years, and I've got stuff around the house that I can kind of make do. And what I'm doing here is I am using, and you probably got something around the house, but I'm sticking it in those grooves and I'm doing a clockwise, and I kind of can get so much of a turn and I have to re-angle it. See if I can get it like trying to be the angle to show it on the camera, and the angle it's actually best to do it is two different things here, but hopefully that caught a little bit of it there. And just be patient with this. The angle I am, if the other angle was a little bit better, you can kind of see it on camera here. I can get maybe like a quarter rotation. So this ain't gonna be the quickest thing unless you got something shorter, or maybe with a T-handle that gets in there a little bit better and spins, or whatever the specialty tool might be for this.
Now, out of curiosity, I did do a search afterwards and found some piston brake caliber cubes that look like would work pretty nicely with a ratchet and extension wrench. Don't know, I'll include an affiliate link if anybody wants to try it. Definitely give a comment on it. But if I had known it was that cheap, I would have gave it a try this time around. I figured it would be a lot more costly part directly from Honda to do this.
I'm going to show it in the manual, that make a little more sense. But if you see that right there, that's a little indicator. So when you screw in the pad all the way, that's what you're trying to go, is this little thing here to that little indicator there. Put the two little pieces of metal back in with the pads. Now again, this was you're going to see something a little different here. This is my old pad. It has the wear indicator with the squealer, and what that does is it gets close enough to that rotor, this little piece will start making noise. And a lot of your new pads may not come with that, and that's the case on mine. So when you see it coming off but not, it's just an aftermarket pad. No biggie there.
Now here you have to pay attention. I'm putting little, like, I'm gonna call them little metal retainer clips at the top and bottom, and I'm kind of having to hold them in place while I'm putting the pad. I didn't realize till I was going back to edit this video that the lighting wasn't very great to say that, but if you can see that little piece of something I'm messing with, again, that's the little retainer pieces, goes top and bottom, and then slides your pads in.
You can see you got your little spring piece right here. Now that's where screwing this in gets so important. I've seen run across some crazy people trying to do things where they replace the caliber or something like that because they're used to this compressing like it does in the front. The rear, again, you're going to tighten that back in, align it to your mark here. You got a little metal shim there, a little metal shim there. You're not going to see the wear indicator again on these because they're new parts. But if you don't do that and you put these new thick pads on, you're not going to get it in enough to clear the pads for reassembly here. And if you can, I think you've seen it right now, hopefully on camera, but I had to push that little guide over to get the pads far enough lined in. I'm a fan on the top bolt of throwing just a little blue Loctite in there as you start that one. Now the bottom, you're screwing into something that is potentially moving. So I'm not a fan of the bottom bolt. Getting the blue Loctite can make it a pain for the next installs. That makes sense. And as you get these started, this assembly is floating a little bit, so do make sure you feel like you've got you're started where you're supposed to before you go crazy with torque and stripping stuff or anything like that.
Another tip that was hard to pick up watching the video is the bottom bolt is going into, like, kind of, I keep calling it a guide, but it's like a floating section to tighten in, and that one you may need to take a wrench to put up in there, or maybe a big flathead screwdriver, but you're going to have to do something to stop that piece from rotating, potentially to tighten that bottom bolt up as you go.
And again, I started the top bolt. Don't go crazy tightening this one until you get this one started. When I say started, a decent amount of threads too. And again, I brought this top one still got a little slack up here to finish that one up. Got that one snug. Now I'm gonna go back and snug the top. Again, this can be a little bit of a tedious job. These are fairly fine thread bolts. The other tip I would give you, depending on how good you are in tight spaces, removing the rear tire. If I had any bigger of a tire on this ATV, I would remove the tire to get to it. Because you can see from here, having that tire also resetting the caliber and just getting everything makes it a little easier. Now, if you do decide to change brake fluid, which I don't need, so I'm not going to show that, this is the tool I recommend. Now you have two separate brake lines as far as hydraulics goes. This is going to be on this caliber, and your fill point's going to be right here at you. This is going to be just for the rear. So when you pump enough, I start pumping with the brake bleeder, and then I keep topping it off until I get that nice clear fluid, or I feel like I've pumped enough through it to replace it. And then same thing with the front. The front caliber is going to be up here for the reservoir, and that's where I was showing you. I'd pull the wheel, get to the caliber, start pulling brake fluid on this one, topping it off as you go so you don't get an air bubble as you do this, and then switch over to the other side, pull the fluid through. And it's easier if you do have a second person just kind of here, keep an eye on it, topping it off. Hey, pause, let me pour some more in there. But you can do it by yourself. Just give it a few pumps. Just make sure you don't suck air here, or here preferably. And again, if you do, just keep bleeding them, but that's the way to pull the fluid out and not really get into crazy bleeding and pumping, that type of thing. And the coolant, kind of the same thing. When I do it, I pull this hose right here, drain it the best I can, fill it back up with fresh, and then whenever I get done, I let the ATV run, and I typically drive up on a bank and let the front end get up, just so as you're pumping the fresh fluid through, you're getting any potential air bubbles. Again, drain it, put your line back on, fill it back up. You got your reservoir and your coolant there. Put the bike up on a pretty good angle, fill it up, let it run, and keep a check on it for air bubbles. Sometimes you might have to do that more than once. The ATVs, I haven't had too much trouble with that. Compared, Pioneers can be a little, Pioneers I go ahead and do it 2 or 3 times just to be on the safe side, not to get out in the trail and then find out I missed an air bubble. And if anybody needs to pause or anything, I'm just going to flip through the pages of the brake section there. And do make sure it is DOT4 fluid. You just got some 3 around for the car, that's not ideal to put in your ATVs. And pause wherever you need to. And again, Honda is showing new hardware. You make your own judgment call on that. Some things I always replace with new, and some stuff I'm like, little blue locker, and I'll send it. And again, that's showing the indicator there. So that's what I was talking about. But yep. Alright, now the next thing we're swapping out is going to be the battery. This one is the factory battery. It's almost 6 years old, and it's still starting the machine. The issue I'm having is if I do let it sit like I normally would, come out, a lot of times I am jumping it off. I can tell it's just getting time for a battery. Now, in the past, I have heard a lot of people say you can't run lithium in Honda ATVs and motorcycles. I have done it now for a decade with pretty decent results. Now, does certain models, is the stator charge at 100%? Certain models, is it maybe not a good idea? But every modern Honda, except for this one, everything I've had sitting in my shop, I've had lithium batteries in and not had any issues with them. Now, 6 years out of a battery, I'm not knocking it. And if I get that out of the lithium, I'll be happy again. I can tell you right now, like this battery, I can literally, probably not even showing what I'm doing here anymore. But yeah. Now I'll include a link an affiliate link in the description for this battery. This lithium battery in particular is brand new to me. I've had good luck with other ones, but this one's brand new. So that light, like it's, I'm actually, you know what? I'm gonna get a scale. That way, but it's massive distance. Now the casing, you got a little rubber casing here, depending on how much mud and dusty stuff you got. May or may not, depend on how much fun it is. But yeah. Now this is the one they called for. Slightly more narrow, but overall the casing, and that's what I was hoping to pick up, is some more power, because some lithium batteries I bought in the past, I'm always looking a bit more amps. If I'm using the winch or light bar, or I run the radio a little bit, I always want that more power. Some lithium batteries will be rated for a certain machine, and you'll buy them and the casing will be like this much, and then you look at the amperage, it's like, yeah, I picked up a little bit, but the size of the battery dropped and I didn't pick up that many amps in comparison. But this one seems pretty good. I'm gonna grab a scale, see what these weigh. All right, so when I say comparison, size wise, again, this one's a little bit more narrow. And when I'm talking about affiliate links, I'm gonna run this battery at least 3 good trips before I probably even edit and air this video. Affiliate links is an easy way to help support the channel. Any product I do an affiliate link to, if I have a bad experience or don't like the product or change up, I will go back in that description. So this is going to be in the description as long as it fires up, runs good for next so many trips before I make this video. But if it messes up or I feel like it fails prematurely or I have some other issue with it, I'll gladly go back in and take the link out and not recommend said product. But my research, I felt like this was a good upgrade overall. Now, this one's got the little button. You can glance at percentage. It's kind of nice, but not that big a deal. Now, weight-wise, there's a big difference. Power-wise, this one is rated for 480 cold cranking amps. This one from the factory is rated for 240. Now, there's a little bit of argument of how sometimes cold cranking amps get rated. Some Amazon products may or may not be the most truthful in how they rate some of their stuff, but hopefully this is the case. I've had good experience with some of the others. Not this brand, is the first time running it. Now, this is a factory battery. It lasts 6 years. This one should take a lot more cycles. Now, amp hour, this one is a 16 amp hour. This one is an 8 amp hour, which sounds like I'm downgrading, but lead acid, a lot of times when you start getting into below 50%, you're potentially damaging this one. Lithium, you can take right up to like that 99% discharge. And as long as the battery management does pretty good, you can run it for a while and you still have strong starting amps to start the engine, for instance. So realistically, power-wise, I should be picking up more. Again, not knocking this battery whatsoever. It's right at 6 years. It's just I'm having to jump it here and there when I go to start it. But not upset with it. Price-wise, both of these are 100 and some change right now if you look on Amazon. And I'll leave a link to this one if you just want to go back to the factory one as well. They've got that listed on Amazon. Now, weight-wise, actually, I think you just go ahead and switch. Should I switch this to pounds? Let's see how it does. This may actually be too heavy. Or it could be my mode. I think it's my mode. So I did have to break out the bathroom scale and 12.2 pounds. Don't tell my significant other I was using her nice glass scale for parts again, but had to find out. And drops off the scale here. And that one is 2.7. I'll get an official weight, but I can tell you, this one, I can easily toss by hand. It almost don't feel like this should be the battery starting the machine. This one, I wouldn't want to land on my toe or toss too much. But let's get this installed. So after a little Google search, the factory battery came out of here is 5,600 grams. According to Google, that makes it about 12.36 pounds. So almost a 10-pound increase. And you can see, I'm sticking it back in the little thing there, but there's a little extra play, whereas the factory battery was tight there. So a little bit of a size, but not where I'm having to stack foam blocks or something like that I've done previously on other. And the little rubber piece, you got one little hook down in here it's going to connect. Stretch it back over and we're locked in. I'm going to scoot that over a little bit just so it's not. Yep. And actually I can touch the button and check that, so not bad. Can't see what the voltage indicator is without peeling it back here. Now the extra wires, this and this is the factory wires. The extra two that I'm connecting here today is for the winch and light bar. Another thing I like too is like the old battery, it has these, which again I've been doing it for ever, but these you have to get in there, you have to get the bolt threaded in, start, and then it pulls up. Sometimes, especially when you get stacks of wires like this, that can be a little bit of a nuisance there. But so when I went to install this, the one thing I noticed is that you can push down for the factory battery, and the clamp does a pretty good job. I don't know if the camera's going to catch it. Like I can force it over a little bit, but it kind of cocks it to try to get that started. But it's just a smidge, and last thing I'm gonna be is out in the trail trying to change a battery or pull something or jump something. I feel like I could make it potentially go, but I feel like it could also start a pattern of maybe stripping that as well. So I don't think it needs much. Just a smidge. That's all I'm doing is taking out a smidge so I don't start off with a cross thread installing a new battery. The negative side, you can see it's got a decent amount of space. It can maneuver where it needs to. The positive, it's got that little U-shaped bracket. Kind of gets locked in pretty tight there, and I feel like that's enough. Let's just try one. If not, we'll. Oh yeah, I can actually start it by hand. Before I'd have kind of had to, I'd have had to have forced it if I would have made it go. And general rule of thumb with batteries, when you're installing them, you install the positive first and then the negative. Alright, first startup test. And that honestly sounded like it started it quicker, so once you have your battery terminal, there's multiple people that make some stuff just like this, but I always like to cut a little bit. Again, these are ATVs, they're going to see dirt, dust, and stuff, so connection can run a day or have you searching around. It's always a good little preventative measure to do there. Alright, so if you've done your coolant, make sure that cap's tight. You can always check your coolant off at an angle there. Top line's your full line on that. Then this one's got two little grooves here and here. And she'll pop in. Now with this, again, I've broke a couple of these. but your, I say broke, like the tabs and stuff. Here and here, there's 2 grooves, and then you have another one on the outers here, and right there's the one you're looking for. And as far as the machine, that's the grooves for the back fender, and those here. If you don't get the grooves lined in correctly, you may notice it not fitting correctly. Just stick your toe in there. See down there. Because if you go forcing pins and stuff first, you're then not going to come back and get these grooved in correctly. You got one here, here. I've already broke that one. Again, if you do these enough, you're probably going to eventually break a tab. But for back side, we'll slide in here and here, and then 2 little push-ins right there and there. Always keep your toe strap. You never know when you have to tow other machines, especially when you drive a Honda. Just kidding, everybody. But no, for real. All right, then this one, you got your little plastic tab right here. Gonna loop underneath here, clip in, and let's go riding.
Now, quick update on the lithium battery now that I've had a few trips underneath my sleeve. Luckily, that ATV is about 10 pounds lighter for that battery. Might have helped me out there. But in the spot, machine is off, the light bar turned on, the headlights turned on. I actually winched the machine back up to the tree right here and still had plenty of juice to actually start the machine and drive it. Now, if you do want to see that video, it's in the description, me doing Trail 15. Now, the only thing that I've noticed is a small hiccup is the power steering light indicator would occasionally flash when I first put it on. Now, before I put the battery in, I fully charged it off of a lithium charger, which is slightly higher voltage than a Honda's stator or electrical system is going to put back into that battery. So the only thing I can think of is when it first started out, it sent slightly higher voltage where I had fully charged it off a lithium charger. The first trip I would notice an occasional flash with the power steering light, and I guess over time as that voltage leveled out off of the Honda charging system, since then I haven't noticed it, or it's become so sporadic I just haven't caught it in the corner of my eye doing it. But didn't even really notice a power steering difference as of yet, which this ATV doesn't seem to have that strong of power steering. Now, if I have any more other issues or anything like that, I'll list it in the description or not recommend it, but so far it does seem like a good fit. And the other thing I will say is the whole time I've had it, the ATV seems to start quicker even than it did when it was brand new straight from the factory. And if anyone on here is pretty knowledgeable and can confirm or deny my theory on the power steering, please sound off on the comment. I'm all ears. Pretty sure that's the case, but not 100%. Now, if you did enjoy this video, or if you enjoy videos like this is one of our favorite things to show off, is the trails, the ride, and stuff like that. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like, share, and subscribe. And until the next adventure, hope y'all have a good one.